Hello, everyone. My name is Esteban. I'm one of the volunteers of PRGDA, and welcome to another creator diving stream. Now, today it's gonna be a very awesome one. I'm super excited to have our guest here, Francisco Martin, who's gonna be talking to you about how to work with customers. It's a very awesome topic. But before that, let's actually review and show for anybody that hasn't seen these streams before. Let's go over them and describe not only what these kind of streams are, but also how you can participate as well if you're interested. Let's talk about how these came about to be. Now, what are creator diving streams? Now we wanted to solve the problem of how is it because people in our community want to learn. They want to learn about different topics, and it just takes too much time to takes so much time to like create all that material, and it's not that many volunteers. But we were like, how can we solve two problems in one stone? How can we give the opportunity for people to share their experience and also add that to their portfolios while also giving an awesome learning opportunity for viewers? And that is the main idea behind these streams. We wanted to give an opportunity for people in the community that they know a particular topic, and that's why we call them creator and not developer diamonds, because you'll see later what is who is it that can participate. Spoiler alert, it's basically everyone. But we wanted to give that opportunity for people to share their knowledge and share the knowledge, whether it could be programming, art, product management, streaming, and so on. Now, and with that, so what is a good topic? What can be a good topic? And this is episode 6 right now, and we're talking about working with customers. We've had episodes about resumes. We've had episodes about art. We have episodes about programming, even overviews of game jam projects. And so a good topic, with all those examples, you can gather that a list of topics can be game design, like whether if you worked on a cool game mechanic, whether you work on a cool effect or a 3D model, or you work on a tool for extending an engine, or you work as a producer or as a project manager, and you like to share a little bit about what is your organizational style and how is it that you keep your team awesome and focused on delivering goals. So all of that can be a good topic. But one thing that we always do say to all of the everybody that is interested is, please don't share any internal company information. No, nothing about unreleased projects, and even internal information about released projects as well. If Especially if you're working for a company, you're not self-employed. So remember, people, always respect your NDAs, and anything that you like to talk about, please get the approval in writing. But again, if you're working on a solo project or something personal or game jam, you can definitely share it. So again, I know we're reiterating a bit the topic, but anybody in the community working on a product can participate, and that's what we show here. And a product is not just a game; it's not just an application. If you're a content creator, if you're a streamer, if you're a journalist, that's also an awesome product, and related to game development, or using game development technology outside of games. That's also a product. That's a creative product, and we want to learn from you as well. And benefits of participating is that you you get to practice talking about your own topic. You get to share your work. You get to share your passion, but also providing an awesome learning opportunity for other people, so that when you share that work and that passion, people can learn from you. And you can also, if you think about it, if you'd like to show a game in progress, or something that you did in a game jam, then you can also get feedback from the community as well. So it's a very cool opportunity. And last but not least, we'll we'll share the stream. You can share the stream. You can add it to part of your portfolio, whether it's your social media, whether it's a development blog, whether it's your art station, whether it's your own YouTube channel, or your own Facebook. You like to share it with family and friends, or a potential employer, a potential recruiter in the future. So that's another way that you could benefit from participating in these. So if you're interested, that's awesome. In fact, today's guest actually helps me, and it's also part of the process of organizing one of these episodes. So when you register this form, and we'll share it in a bit, you can go ahead and you sign in. You put your name, your email, put the topics that you were interested in and what you'd like to talk about. And Francisco and I will help you. Will help you organize your talk, even practice it as well. And your talk can be in English or Spanish. Today we're doing it in English, but there have been other talks in the past that we've done in Spanish. So again, it's your style. It's your style. In your topic, and you're really in control. We're here to support you in sharing your message and sharing your passion. And I believe, yep, this is the last slide. And today I'm really excited about this topic because this is something that can help you out. It doesn't matter whether you're a freelancer and working with external customers. It doesn't matter. It could be if you're a developer, a tools developer, and you're working with a customer, a client. But I'm not gonna start talking about the main topic because that's why we have our awesome guests here. Everybody, give it up for a very accomplished and a very awesome person and a very talented gameplay programmer, Francisco Martin.
Oh my God, you're gonna make me blush. You're gonna make me blush.
Francisco, how you
I,
doing, dude?
good, good. Honestly, it feels kind of weird being on the other side, on the right side of the screen instead of the left side of the screen,
Same
But
for me.
I'm really excited. Yeah, right. I'm very excited to be talking about this, about working with customers.
Indeed. And with that, Francisco, the stage is yours, my friend. And I'm gonna put
Thank
your
you.
side of the presentation. And everybody, here's Francisco about working with customers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the talk. I'm going to be talking about a little bit about working with customers. But before we get into working with customers, you might be asking yourself, who is this guy? Why should I listen to what he has to say about working with customers? Well, I've worked with a lot of different companies. I graduated from Georgia Tech in 2016, and since then, I've been at around now at five companies, different companies. Some of them were very indie startups. Virtual World Arcade, Subdream Studios were both VR startups. I then went over to Wizards of the Coast, which is a pretty big one. There, I worked on Magic the Gathering Arena. If you don't know about Magic the Gathering, it's like the grandfather of all card games. Most recently, they published Baldur's Gate. They didn't develop it, but they did publish Baldur's Gate 3. So I know that has been going around and people really enjoy it. So that's something that they've done recently. After that, went to work on Gempop Interactive. That's another startup. This time it was a third person shooter. Other than that, the project has not been released. So uh, I hope that I just had a Steam pop up of a friend of mine is playing Baldur's Gate 3, so I hope that that doesn't show up for everyone else. Then after that, went over to with People Can Fly. I'm working on an unannounced title. The code name is Project Victoria. The they People Can Fly. They used to be a subsidiary of Epic. They worked a little bit on Fortnite. They worked on one of the Gears of War games, Outriders, the Bulletstorm. Most recently, they released Bulletstorm VR. So also a pretty big one in the industry. Some of the games that I've worked on has been a VR version of Galaga Fever for Bandai Namco. That was one where we were contracted by them to create this VR version. I worked on this game called Cybernet Combat. If you are a fan of Mega Man Battle Network, it was essentially a VR version of that game. If you've never played that game, imagine it kind of like boxing or tennis with a card game attached to it. So essentially, like each round, you would could move around and shoot a very basic pellet, but after each round you could draw 5 cards and get some really good ones and then use those as power-ups. I already mentioned Magic the Gathering Arena, worked on that. And the last two projects, redacted, not yet released, not yet can talk about them. Hopefully someday I can have a video there of what I'm actually working on or worked on. But without any further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes, into what everybody is here for. working with a customer. So, how do we work with a customer? There's a lot of different ways to work with a customer, but first we're going to go into what is a customer. A lot of people think customer and they think, oh, somebody who pays the bills. But in video game development and production, customer can mean a lot of different things, and it's not necessarily somebody who pays for something. So we'll get a little bit into who the customer is, some synonyms for customer, and all that stuff. Setting expectations with your customer is going to be very important whenever you're working on creating working with your customer. Is going to be very important to do expectations. Scheduling demos, also very important for working with a customer. Then after that, we're gonna go into kind of like a lightning round, kind of. We're just gonna do some lessons that I've learned over the years about working with customers. Finished it off with a Q&A, and there are some bonus slides if we have some time. We can go over them. So let's get into it. Identifying your customer. Before we talk a little bit more in depth about who the customer actually is, let's talk a little bit about why this is important. I want to give a little bit, take a step back and give a little bit of context as to why it's important to correctly identify your customer and to work with your customer correctly. Um, Communication with your customer is going to determine the future of not just your projects, but possibly your career. You do want to make sure that the project is as best at it as it is, but it's also very important. Something that I'm going to be talking a lot about in this presentation is that at the end of the day, there are no right or wrong answers usually with video games and development and just any software development or just any development. It's all about trade-offs and what is required or what is needed, and the customer kind of sets those up. So working on a project and not being able to identify your customer and not being able to deliver the project that your customer is expecting makes you lose time. It makes you lose designs. It makes you lose art assets. It might disgruntle your customer to not be a good relationship in the future. So making sure that you have a working relationship, a really good working relationship with your customer is very important. Not just for this project, but also for any future projects that you might have with this customer. As a and as an example of my life and my experience, while working with Bandai Namco on Galaga Fever, the team, and mostly I, failed to identify the customer. And because of that, we lost 1.5 months of time in development. So now that we know why it's important to identify our customers, we don't want to waste time. We want to make the best project we can. Let's talk about identifying a customer. A customer is a party member who has the final word on project completion. Some examples of this are a publisher. So if you have somebody if you're working with a publisher and you promise them, hey, we want to make a game with these things, the customer is going to hold you to that and be like, okay, that's what we want. Or maybe a publisher comes to you as a development studio and says, hey, we want you to work on this and we'll pay you and we'll publish it and release this game. A contractor, a lot of indie developers get their start, and I got my start in contract work, working directly with a person who's contracting me, and that person is the customer in that case. But even in bigger companies where you are part of this conglomerate, more like EA, Ubisoft, and all these things, you still have customers. It's just a little bit more of an abstract customer. It is a designed role where somebody is chosen to be the customer. It's just that way that there is a final say in all these things. It could be the game director, it could be your lead, it could be the product owner, all these different things. But at the end of the day, it also could be you. You might be the customer. If you are truly going 100% indie, you're publishing, you're releasing your own game, you're developing your own game, you might be the customer for the game that you're making. And if this is the case, we're going to have a slide to talk a little bit about how do you approach working on a project where you yourself are both the developer and the customer. The most important thing about identifying your customer is all parties must be clear on who the customer is. If you can, have it written down if it's not 100% clear. If it's a contractor, then that's pretty clear. But if it's a publisher, okay, who in the publishing team is the customer? Who in the internal team is the customer? And if it's you, then it's you. And that is very important for everyone to be clear on, so that everybody doesn't actually make incorrect assumptions about how the project is going and if the project is going in the direction that it should be going or not. So very quickly, let's talk about you as the customer. What if you are the customer? This is a time where you would look in the mirror and talk to yourself and make sure, like, hey, you need to being a developer is a lot of fun, but you sometimes get lost in the sauce. Sometimes you kind of lose track of what you're actually trying to work towards. So whenever you are trying to work as yourself as a customer, and just to make this clear, I guess I'm going to take a bit of a step back. The reason it's important to that, even if you are going fully indie, that you're your own customers, because at the end of the day, you want to release a game. If you're creating a project without essentially setting yourself as a customer, you might fall into the trap of just entering a project that never ends. You just keep on developing things that might not be as important, and you just don't give yourself deadlines. You're not reviewing to check if you're actually moving towards releasing this game, and you end up with a project that never releases because you're essentially just running wheels on mud or snow. Um, so whenever you're setting yourself as a customer, you want to make sure that whenever you're doing some reviews, you're separating yourself completely. There's this whole thing about putting your designer hat, putting your engineering hat, and all these different things. And being a customer is a different hat that you can wear. You want to keep your project spec as a living document. Essentially, you're going to keep this document that you will say what are the goals, what are the designs, what are some decisions that you've made, what are some things that you've decided not to do, what is the deadlines that you're trying to hit. So when you have this living document, you want to set up these deadlines and all these things. And whenever you're doing your reviews, you want to check, okay, is my project moving towards this goal? Am I on track to completion? Check if the current path is your best one. If you decided, oh, by the end of this month, or by the end of next month, I want multiplayer to be done, ask yourself, well, actually, is multiplayer that important for my game? Is it more important to do the single player experience? Is the current path the correct one? With these reviews, you're going to want to update that living document, that project spec, to make sure that it is updated with the decisions that you have made at this intermittent reviews. This way, this also, by the way, helps a lot. If you are an indie developer that is working on a project on the side between contracts and all these different things, where you might take a month or two off your indie game development because you have a contract or you have some other responsibilities that you need to take care of, this project spec and living document is really helpful for you to come back and understand, this is where I was at, this is what I wanted to do, I know where to continue from here. So, setting expectations. This is probably after you've identified your customer, after you have a face to face with them. Setting expectations is probably one of the most important things to do with your customer. So, let's talk about how does one set expectations. So, you want to document everything. Documenting your deliverables is very important when you're working with customers. We've all worked with amazing customers that would never do what I'm about to say, but there are some customers that might feel like, oh, I wanted this and you didn't do this. Well, we set this expectation before I started working, and these were the deliverables. And as you can see, I have met those deliverables. So documenting, having that paper trail is very important when working with your customers. Overestimate effort hours per item. This goes into the overestimate and underdeliver. Obviously, don't go crazy with your overestimates. Actually, just add a little bit extra. A little bit of that with the overestimating effort hours is to allow for iteration. A lot of the time, your customer won't say that's exactly how I wanted that feature on the first go. You're gonna need to, when we talk a little bit about demos, there's gonna be some iteration, and those iterations might take longer than you expect. So overestimating is pretty important. Communicate the pros and cons of certain designs and development paths. Um, During the set expectations phase, during this planning phase that you can have with your customer, you there isn't a black and white answer to yes, we can do all of this, no, we can't do all of this. It's more about, hey, customer, you said you wanted to make a game with A, B, C, and D. We could develop A in a month, but we could also develop B, C, and D inside that same month. Do you feel like that's more important? What are your priorities? What is the thing that is the most important for you to get what you want? And we're actually going to learn a little bit about the tools of the trade. Um, that first one about like, hey, how do we get to what exactly you want, the minimum viable product. This is a really good video about this, is by Extra Credits, that's playing there in mute, about the minimum viable product. That's essentially the bare minimum that you can get to, and you can still release or show to someone your game and they're like, I get it. So for example, when we were talking about here in this video, one of the examples they give is the original Mario. The original Mario, what would be your MVP? Well, you don't need enemies, you don't need power-ups, you don't need warp pipes, you don't need a lot of the things that you would expect. Oh, this is Mario. You don't need all that. You just need to make sure, okay, the core loop of moving through a world, avoiding obstacles, is that fun? Is it fun to move around as Mario? Is it fun to dodge things and all the and dodge things? Because at the end of the day, everything in Mario is essentially an obstacle course in the original Mario, right? Like Goombas, Koopa Troopers, pitfalls, everything is just essentially you trying to dodge and maneuver around them. So if the base version of that is fun, then by extension, the full version of that would also be fun. So creating that minimum viable product as early as possible is very important. Another tip: make that MVP very obvious that it's an MVP. Don't go crazy putting textures in the game. Try to use as much default grids and all these different things, so that way the customer, especially if they don't have much experience in game development, don't confuse that as the how the project is going to look or where we're moving towards the project. Make it very obvious that it is a minimum viable product. There could also be in certain projects that are more art heavy, you could split MVP into two pieces, making the MVP be more gameplay focused and play focused, and then the other art is the art corner, is what we would kind of call the MVP of arts, which is essentially you get one room and one character to a very polished state, and you base off the rest of your art and everything based on those, and that's the first thing you show to them. So that's one of the tools of the trade, the minimum viable product. Moscows. I love Moscows. These are must, it stands for must, should, could, and will not. I'ma be a nerd here and tell you that I use Moscows outside of work. Like, for example, when me and my partner were apartment hunting, we created a Moscow to kind of like prioritize what are things that we must have in this new apartment search versus what things we would like, what things we don't need, and what things we will not. So Moscow is a very simple tool to kind of like prioritize things and show to your customer, and everything that they say, oh, we want this feature, we want this mechanic. You talk with them and say, okay, where does that fall? Is that a must? Is that a should, a could, will not? Where does it fall? As a rule of thumb, this what I have written here about demoted by must are only demoted by customers. These things are much more in my experience, and it's much more like guidelines. I personally see it as if every must is demoted by customers. So essentially, if a customer has decided that it's a must, then you kind of have to run it by them to see if it can be moved to a should. Shoulds are demoted by designers. So essentially, if a designer says, actually, this isn't a should, this can be moved down to a could. Those are the people that move that. Coulds, that's when you're entering your realm of producers and engineers, and they're saying, oh, this, we don't have time. So this could is going to get devoted to will not. So this is another tool for setting expectations, the Moscow. So why is it important? There's a lot of reasons why expectations are very important, but here we're going to talk a little bit, our 4 bullet points. It allows customers to become invested. Um, Depending on your customer might show up and say, hey, I want a first person shooter that is kind of like Overwatch, and then just peace out. And then you're like, we need to do this. Well, it's better if you can get the customers more invested in the process, and creating that Moscow and to having them be part of that MVP review is very, gets them invested, gets them excited on the project, and gives them better communication tools to communicate with you if the project is going in the right direction. Quality projects that don't meet expectations are failed projects. It could be an amazing game. If you didn't hit what the customer wanted, then at the end of the day, it might not even see release, because they might not even publish it. They might not even push it to, they might just say, you know what, you're taking too long. This is not what we wanted. We're cutting off our relationship. So make sure that you are hitting these expectations and you're working towards these expectations. Reduces confusion in development team. This one's very important if the customer isn't within communication reach. Sometimes the customer, if it's a contractor, you only talk with them once a week, once every 2 weeks, or something like that. So having these expectations set beforehand makes it very much more easy for you to make assumptions and make educated guesses in between those times. And finally, it gives agencies to ICs, to individual contributors. If you've created a Moscow and everybody is in line with what the Moscow is and what the feature is and what the points and the goal of the project is, you give more opportunities for your individual contributors to be able to also make assumptions and educated guesses, and to feel like they have much more ownership over the features that they are developing. So all in all, if you want to summarize this, it's all about getting the information written and in front of everyone so that everyone has a better understanding, a better time developing. Next, let's talk about scheduling demos. So, scheduling demos, this is where that overestimating is going to come important. Iterating on design. Demos give you an opportunity for people outside parties to play your game, or to play your product if you're not making a game. It gives you an opportunity to review, communicate what worked and what did not. It also gives you actually a really nice morale boost whenever, more often than not, I'm not going to say that this is always the case. Sometimes the case is that you'll hit a demo and people are going to be like, I didn't like it. But more often than not, you are going to be much more harder on the project that you're working on than outside parties. And so it is a really nice morale boost whenever you're like, I don't like how this mechanic is working. I really don't think it's going to work. And then everybody says like, oh my God, this mechanic is great and awesome. And you feel, oh my God, okay, maybe this is the right path. Maybe this is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Uh, During these demos where you're showing other people your game and you're letting them play without without you backseat gaming and everything, you want to talk with your customer afterwards. Maybe your customer is playing the game. Maybe your customer is watching people who've never played the game play the game, and you're going to talk with them. Okay, what deliverables did we meet? What did we are we like done? This is good. From a design perspective, there are multiple levels. This is kind of getting into production pipeline, and this could be its own different conversation about the different levels of what a deliverable can be like, if it's a prototype, if it's a polish, if it's shippable, and all these different things. But for now, let's just simplify it and just ask, hey, what deliverables we met? What did we are we hitting correctly? What designs were changed? Sometimes in between demos, you realize this doesn't work. We don't need to wait for a demo to realize that this does not work. What did we change and how did we change it? Go back to the spec, write that you changed it. Keep the original, but strike through or just update, create like another copy of like, so that way there's like a timeline of things of like, this didn't work and this is now how it is. Which deliverables need to be removed? There might be things that either A, because of time, you decide actually we don't have time for this, so we're going to remove this deliverable, or there might be things that were deliverables that were added because of worries about certain mechanics not working out. For example, let's say there's a game where you have self-healing and you're worried, oh, self-healing might make the game too easy, so we might need to take that away and put health packs. So next deliverable is health packs. Oh, actually self-healing was fine and we don't need health packs. Okay, cool. Maybe that might be the case. And lastly, choose the next deliverables to work on. Talk about, okay, what are we going to be working on next? So why is this important? This is a lovely TikTok that I actually enjoy. I'm going to be talking over it so we don't spend too much time, but it's about this designer creating this fun bucket where you take these shapes and you put them into the hole that it corresponds. And she's like very excited. Yes, the rectangle goes into the rectangle. Oh, they put it into the square. The cylinder, where does the cylinder go? The circle, right? The circle. No, no, that goes into the square hole as well. So it goes to show you that you might have designed a really good system that in your head makes a lot of sense. And then when it comes to demo day, you realize, oh my God, either the player didn't get it or the player found an exploit and they're just doing the same thing over and over again. There's I forgot the term for this, but there is a term in game design where if a player finds a tool that is works 90% of the time in like the beginning of the game, they will never explore the other designs because they'll just continue doing it. It's very obvious in some fighting games where oh yeah, like crouch kick is so powerful, I'm just gonna crouch kick throughout the whole game and I don't need to care about making a Hadouken because crouch kicking will get me there. Some designs work great but might not work for the project. I had a project in which we were considering having some Tony Hawk-esque movement where you could go off ramps and do some crazy physics and do all these different things. But we ended up deciding actually we want this game to be a little bit more competitive. It was a shooter. So we decided physics is a little bit not as predictable as discrete movement paths. So we're going to just not do we're not going to do physics for our movements. We're going to focus on making them a little bit more discrete. And lastly, it reneges customers being able to renege on their deliverables. If your demos are monthly, you won't lose 3 months of development time because 3 months down the line, they can't be like, oh, I don't like this mechanic. And you're like, well, we can talk about redoing that mechanic, but what happened between now and then when you said that mechanic was good that made you change your mind? Is it other systems that are affecting that mechanic? At the end of the day, you can just be if they're being mean and they're like, why did you even do this? This system sucks. You can be like, no, we have demos and we have data points that say, and your word that you like that and all these different things. Why? So it gives an opportunity for you as a developer to also protect yourself with these demos. So lessons I've learned: definitions are not universal. Do not assume the definition of words. Sometimes this happens so often when I feel like me and another developer are talking past each other. And at the end of the day, I realize the way that I tackle this is like, wait, what do you mean by blank? And then when they tell me what they mean by blank, I'm like, oh, okay, because I was thinking that blank meant this. For example, what is a game? Games are, God, this becomes such a philosophical question about what are games. I believe Merriam-Webster calls it a form of play with rules and decided by skill, strength, or luck. But to other people, a game could be a game of Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing doesn't fit into this. I guess you can say that there's some skill in fishing, but other than that, there isn't really a lot of skill, strength, or luck in that game. Well, maybe luck, depending you're lucky which animal comes out. So maybe it does fit into this definition of a game. I would still call it a game. But yeah, definitions are not universal. Example, Galaga Fever. We approached it thinking, oh, this is an arcade game. It's going to be very like point heavy, very exponential difficulty. So that way there's a sweet spot of around 5 minutes of gameplay, but technically you can go on for much longer, or you might go for much less. It depends on your skill. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted more of like an interactive experience, more kind of like Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin, or the new Toy Story Circus thing. So games like that, they are much more of an interactive experience, where for that game, later on we learned that actually they want the game to always last at least 4 minutes and at most 5 minutes, so that exponential difficulty curve wasn't going to work out. So what we did is we made it a way that it was impossible for you to lose in those first 4 minutes, and then a mechanic was introduced where now you have a life bar at these last minutes, and if you die in this last minute, then you die. And likewise, there are players that don't realize games like Candy Crush are actually games. They consider it an app. Yeah, that's very good point. Some games are, especially the cookie clicker genre, the clicker game genre. Some people consider that as apps, and that's its own like philosophical, like what expectations do these genres and these titles give those things. That becomes very important for you to have that discussion with your customer. Finally, to that question, learning to listen. So what I wanted to come before we get to learning to listen, let's get back to, thank you for being so patient with me. What do you feel is the difference between a customer and a user player? User players do, at the end of the day, do not have the final say on your project. There's a lot of things that go into what the final say of your project is. If you want to be incredibly cynical, you can say, hey, players might not want X mechanic, but X mechanic makes money, so it's going into the game. And that's for the customer to choose, not your player base. But to be less cynical, let's say that this is a very artistically driven project where you have a message that you want to drive home. A good example of this is Last of Us Part 2. A lot of people didn't 100% like Last of Us Part 2. I would personally put myself in that camp, that I wasn't the biggest fan of Last of Us Part 2. But you can't deny that it was a very artistically motivated game, a game where the creators really wanted to tell a story, and the customer, maybe it was Neil Druckmann, I don't know who the customer in that project would have been, but he really wanted to tell that story, and that was more important than I guess I won't say spoilers. So was more important than how some of the players perceive that game. And finally, the reason I waited for this slide is players are really good at pointing out problems, but not necessarily good at pointing out solutions. That's a quote by Mark Rosewater. He has a great GDC talk called 20 Lessons in 20 Years. And this quote is from that video. If you have any time, I think it's now public because it's from a very old GDC. In fact, he's probably now reaching 30 plus years of Magic, developing Magic. And to that end of players are really good at pointing out problems, but not necessarily good at pointing out solutions. One of the stories that I've always heard that is a very good example of this was a story that came out of Halo. I forgot which Halo. I think it was Halo 2 or 3. Not 100% sure. But playtests kept coming back that the AI is really dumb. The AI is too dumb. They're too easy. They're too predictable. They need better branching paths. They need better decision making and all these different things. And the developers and designers took a long time creating more branching paths, but always the feedback was the same. Oh, the AI isn't smart. The AI isn't smart. We should make it more complex and everything. And it got to the point where they were spending so much time with it that they needed to stop working on it, and they needed to start working on other important stuff. So a designer who was still working on the AI and stuff and the difficulty decided, you know what? I'm going to artificially make the game, make them smarter or more difficult by making their HP higher. So he across the board made all HPs 20% higher. And immediately the playtest right after that, the feedback came in. Yep, this AI is smart. It's great. We love it. The decision making is in depth and everything. And nothing had changed between the last playtest and that playtest other than they raised the HP of the enemies. So players are really good at pointing out problems, but not necessarily good at pointing out solutions. And that's very important for you whenever you are developing a game and playtesting and doing demos. And that is one of the reasons why I don't think that there's a difference between a customer and a user slash player. Just because a user slash player says, "Oh, you should do this," doesn't mean that it's a good idea. And the customer, on the other hand, if it's a good customer that you have a good working relationship, is looking out to have the best ideas and to have the best features in the game to be successful. It's about how those features and mechanisms affect player motivations and values and measures of success. If a feature isn't meeting that, of course, they will have to point out what's wrong. But I agree that not always great at pointing out solutions. Yes, yeah, exactly. So they're like a player is never wrong when it comes to something feels bad or something is wrong. They're never like if something is bad or something feels wrong, um uh they're probably right. There is something in the project that is wrong for them or bad for them. Their feedback is valid and their emotions about it is valid. So this is not to say you need to make sure that whenever you're doing these demos and listening, you're not just like, bah, you don't know anything, bah, you don't know anything, because what they're saying is very important. But what you need to make sure is that you're separating it between when they say, "Oh, this is wrong," you need to get a little bit deeper into that and say, "Okay, what exactly do you mean by that? Is that what is wrong, or is there something deeper that is wrong?" Corali, as a UX designer, how many stories like this do you have? UX designers, God bless your hearts and souls. This is probably like one of the cruxes of your job. This is the one of the reasons why your job exists. If it was so easy to just point out a solution and know what is the right answer, there everybody would be a UX designer, and therefore no UX designers would have to exist. It is a much more difficult problem than people give it credit for. Design is just one of those things where it's just in general much more difficult than people give it credit for. People just have a lot of games have been around long enough that people now think that it is very conventional wisdom, certain things where this might not be the case. Yeah, people are hard, people are complex. Back to the presentations, learning to listen. This is a very important thing. Make sure that you're asking questions to find the core of the problem, going back to like people are good at pointing out problems, but not necessary solutions. Keep asking them to find what that core is. Play devil's advocate. Careful with being devil's advocate. Be clear that you are doing so. If you're not clear that you're playing devil's advocate, then you might end up looking like an asshole or being like very mean and all these different things. So make sure that when you're being that devil's advocate, make sure to be like, hey, I think I agree with you here, but I want to understand, I want to tackle this from another perspective to see if it still holds true. So let me ask you questions as a detractor. And do not be afraid of not being a yes person. Been in a lot of projects where everybody was like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, cool. Where the customer is essentially saying, and we need this, and everybody's like, yeah, let's do it, and we need this, and yeah, let's do it. Don't be afraid to be that person and be like, actually, do we need that? Actually, is that what's best for the project? And talk with them through with it. Learning how to say no. This is very, very important. A lot of customers will want to do more with the same resources. It's normal human behavior that you will want to try to get the most bang for your buck. You want to try, even me as a developer, I want to develop more than what I have time to develop. So even not just customers, even me as a developer, I want to do more than I have time or resources to give. But you need to at some point you need to say no. A good quote is, well, yes, but actually no meme, where it's like, yeah, that would be easy, but no, we don't have time. Use project spec to prevent feature creep. Feature creep is a huge thing that happens. Using project spec is very important. This is where documenting everything becomes very, very important, to be like, no, we kind of talked about this, and this is what we're going to be doing. One of the projects, they asked me 1 week before release, hey, can we do X? And I was like, at that point, I was like, I honestly did not did not tackle that the best. I was like, no. I just straight up said no. I would go back and say, don't give a hard no. Instead, talk about what will need to be deleted or what would need to be removed by saying yes to that. That way, it gives the customer a sense of agency and it allows them to come to the same conclusion of no. And maybe they don't come to the same conclusion, and in that case, maybe you misunderstood an expectation for something. Maybe that extra level is more important than having 3 extra guns in game. Who knows? Like that is something that you will have to be talking. This could be a talk by, yes. Learning to say no is a very hard challenge, and you will, especially when you're very young in your development career, you're gonna want to do everything, and you're gonna want to say yes to everything, and it sometimes becomes very difficult to say no. So yeah, trying to, yeah, learning to say no, very important. And that, without further ado, is everything. Hey, Esteban, welcome back.
Hey, Francisco was hanging out of the back, but oh my god, dude, that was awesome. Even myself, I was writing down some questions that I missed. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I hadn't thought about this, but thank you very much. That was amazing. I
Thank you.
knew this was
Thank you.
gonna be awesome. Like this is something that anybody could benefit from. Like you, as we've already seen, UX designers, UX designers clearly, freelancers, tools developers, and
Toolset
this
developers,
is
that in
super
of
cool.
itself, that's something
Yeah,
that I didn't mention. Toolset developers, who are your customer? Developers are your customer, right? Your game developers are
heck
your
yeah,
customer. So that's one of those situations where, weirdly enough, the developer is the customer to these tool set creators. I'm very fortunate right now that the company that I am right now has its own tool set team, and they're amazing, and I love talking with
nice.
them, and I love like, hey, we need this, and they're like, we got you, let's go. It's great.
And by the way,
Mm.
Francisco, with that we have two questions, and first one by Corali.
In your experience, what are things that make great clients that folks should look for, I'm assuming is the question, should look for as they find work? um So that could be even of its own. Like, how do you look for work, and how do you find clients? That could be its own talk. Really quickly, what I look for, one of them is just networking. That's a huge thing. Have other people worked with this person, and are they chill, or alternatively, do people say steer clear from from this client? Another one is how invested they are in the project. If the person that if the customer is very like checked out, then they probably there it's not necessarily true, but there is greater opportunity for them to, at the end of everything, be like, oh, I don't, this is not what I expected. So trying to find somebody who seems like they are more checked in, they're more excited to continue having these conversations with you, is really good. Somebody who, especially when you're entering the like, if you're doing some more like bidding type stuff when you're looking for clients, if the bidding takes too long, I would say it's probably not a great experience. Probably don't work with that person. If they're giving you a hard time now during the how is this relationship gonna work, and how much am I gonna get paid? If they're giving you a hard time now, before they are giving you money, they're gonna give you an even harder time after they've given you money. So that's another like red flag to kind of like back up from. Uh, what they've released before. If they're a publisher, what other games have they published? That is also a really good thing to check in their track record. So yeah, good question. Those are some things that I look for when I'm talking, seeing with clients.
Now another question by Red Joker. Just
Are same use freelance work with other developers? Are you saying that maybe if you join as a freelance developer to a team of already create or like let's say you're being brought in as a contract temp developer in a team that's already well established. I'm going to assume that's what the question means for now. And by that, your customer at that point in time would be that development team. Weirdly enough, that would mean that you have like a customer, like a grandfather customer, so to speak, right? Like you have that development team has a customer that they are answering to, and your customer is not that customer. Your customer is the development team. Because at at the end of the day, when you're doing that freelance job, you are trying to make those developers happy. You're not like, if they incorrectly talk with their customers, then that doesn't become your job. Your job is to make those developers, those are your customers, which is a really good point that I don't think I brought up and I haven't been asked before, really, of like, if I'm coming in as a freelance artist or freelance something to a team as a temporary developer, who is my customer? I would say that development team is your customer, not necessarily their customer. But we have another question, the next one by Pandemonium. Do you feel like you've ever drawn on your background as a Boricua in your work? I cannot. No comment, I will say. That's all I can say because unfortunately there are some projects that have not come to life where I have used my background as a Boricua to help me out.
well,
So
one
I cannot say much more than that. This is not necessarily 100% Boricua, but it's a lot more about being bilingual. Um, and this is something that I mean, I haven't read all the papers, so I don't 100% know all the details about it, about the papers and the research that has been done. But it has been shown that people who are bilingual or know more than one language are much more empathetic and much more have better understanding skills than they're on average. Obviously, every person is different. This is just a very like on average paper kind of thing. So being bilingual, maybe unknowingly, yeah, such as culture, language, and diversity. Being bilingual definitely, I think, has helped me being more empathetic. I have worked with people that English was not their first language. Bandai Namco, they're based in Japan, so English was not their first language. So being able to be more empathetic with people who are trying their best to communicate in the common language that is being communicated in the development, but might not necessarily be their most comfortable language, is something that you will a lot bring out of in your language. Um, Culture and diversity. I think that something that is very culturally relevant about Puerto Ricans that isn't, I don't want to stereotype ourselves, but we are much more vocal than other cultures. And I think, and that's good and bad sometimes. Sometimes you need to learn to like be quiet and listen. But I do feel that that has given me a opportunity to be much more vocal as an engineer. Engineers are much more on the nerdier. We are much more mathematical. We are much more step by step, trying to find the right answer and trying to be more pragmatic about things. And by that nature, it makes us a lot more usually introverted. And I feel like being Boricua has very much given me a voice and made me say I can be vocal about things, about what I feel like is the right and wrong things, and all those things as a as a Boricua. And lastly, diversity. It's a lot of fun when people, I know that this is not a go ahead for all you non-Boricuas to be like, oh, I have a Puerto Rican on my team. They are now the token Puerto Rican who has the final say on everything Puerto Rican or Spanish related or anything. But it is, I personally do enjoy it when people come and ask me questions about certain things. For example, there is a villain in Magic the Gathering called Nicol Bolas, which in Spanish would be Nicol Bolas. And somebody did come to me like, be real with me. Is bolas a euphemism for something else in Spanish? And I was like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But this is a 25-year-old character. You can't really change the name of this character at this point. But yeah, it is. Another big one that I love that I'm trying to push for in any company that I work on is trying to use more gender inclusive language in Spanish. That one is very important to me, and I try to push it, and I really enjoy. There's been a bunch of companies where they come to me and they're like, our localization team gave us this, but it's gendered. Can you think of something that is not gendered that would give the same message? That one, love it. Love this thing. Coquito and Christmas. My goodness, I always bring flan for my birthday. I bring flan to like as a birthday cake to the office on my birthday, and I bring coquito on the last day before we go off on vacation. So that way, if people want to drink it with a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of rum, they can.
Oh, I've had experience where people go like start super drinking and it's like, whoa, hold on, it's just to sip. It's just to sip. It's like, dude, you're basically drinking a cake right now with alcohol.
I've had some people where I serve it whatever and they do a chug and they immediately like, that has a lot more rum than I expected. And I'm like, might be like, that's my bad. Yeah, it's more of a sipping thing.
Exactly. By the way, Francisco, I want to make sure that I don't miss Dark Moon Sama's question, which was,
yeah, sure, yes. In your experience, do clients normally come in with a solid vision of what they want, or is it usually a general concept that developers then have to work on building from it? That is a great question.
Indeed, I laughed a little bit because I know part of the answer, but go ahead.
In my experience,
very good question.
In my experience, I would say that when you're doing freelance work / more indie development, more contract work, clients have a solid vision of what they want, but don't know how to get there at all. In my experience, it's kind of like how I envision drawing back when I used to practice a lot of drawing. A lot of the time, I had in my head, I could see the picture in my head of the character and the pose I wanted to draw them and all these and the perspective I wanted it to have. But then when I put pen to paper, it just did not work out. In my experience, most contract work come in like that. Um, I will say that in more bigger studios, it definitely is more of a general concept. Bigger studios have more money to have a bigger, a longer burn down chart when it comes to money. So they have more time to develop ideas and to be in this pre-production stage where they're like, we're just finding the fun. We're just going ahead and trying out different stuff and different things. So great question. Yeah, I think that in my experience, it has been more individual contract work is they have a pretty solid vision, not necessarily a very solid action plan, versus if it's a bigger company, it's definitely much more of a general concept, and you have to talk and have a conversation to work with it. So yeah, that's a great question. I'm not in the industry yet, but these dive-ins are still very valuable. Yeah. Working with customers is almost like 101 learnings. I would not say 101. It's probably 201, after you've decided and figured out if you're an artist or a designer or an engineer, after you've decided which role you want to go for and practice at that role, the next lesson is essentially how do you work with customers, right? Because unless you're, even if, like I said, even if you're working with yourself and you're only doing your own things, um, it's important to always have that at the back of your head of like, am I going is this going in the right direction? Is this primo?
At least for me, one final question, Francisco. Like these kind of lessons, that, other than obviously, other than experience in
Mhm.
over the years and in your studies and also in your gigs, are there any resources that you recommend? Whether podcasts, whether books on
Mhm.
how to work with clients, and or
Uh,
just in general how to organize, keep things neat and tidy, and in the communication and everything.
yeah. So I would say that for resources, extra credits, now they've kind of rebranded to Extra History, but you can still see their early videos. That one has a lot to do with the development and making of games. That one is very good. GDC Vault, very good resource. Postmortems, those are really good. Especially if you look at the postmortems that are more on games that either that talk about pipeline or games that didn't work. There's a lot of discussion there about like, oh, we didn't work really well with this customer and all these different things. Those are some really good resources. As far for tools, um, I use a lot of professionally. I use Jira, but Jira is a paid service that not
Classic.
many people have access to. If you don't know what that is, it's a production tool to kind of like keep tickets and like pipelines and processes. However, if you want a free version that is really good, I've been trying to stall to remember the name of it. It's called
Trello.
something board. Trello.
Oh, oh,
Trello. No,
Trello.
no, no, no.
Oh,
You're
cool. I got
you're
it.
Trello.
Nice.
Trello. That's right. That's right. Trello is a really good one. Um, that is free to use. Well, I haven't used it in a while. I'm assuming it's still free to use. Maybe it has a paid version or
It
something like
is.
that.
It is.
Okay.
Even I use it for my own personal tasks and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Trello is pretty primo for especially, and you can share the link to the Trello board, but they can't. You can share a link that is not editable, which is really good for both having your customer be able to see what is getting worked on, how it's getting worked on, what is in review, what is not in review at a single glance. It's also really good for if you ever want to make a more early access game and you want to have a more iterative experience of developing a game with your player base. It's really good as well to kind of like put out a Trello board of like, hey, I'm an indie developer. You as a player can check out what you're doing. Monday, I've heard a lot of, never used them myself, but I've heard a lot about Monday. Um, uh, Guys, Codex, I've not heard of that one.
Neither have
Uh,
I.
uh,
Well, there's a
I
lot.
might have to check out and check it out. Other than those, Google Drive. I don't use Word. I use Google Drive and just like here's my project spec. Here's the directory with all the projects I've been working on. GitHub has its own pretty good wiki system. Not really good for tracking management, but if you want to have like a single space attached to your project files that has kind of like a project spec, pretty good. Um, yeah. Um, Working with customers is definitely touching on more on the pipeline side of things, more of the production side of things. That is not as easy to just quantify and just say, read this and you will be an expert in with dealing with customers. Unfortunately, it is a lot more experience based, a lot more and not just necessarily your own experience but other people's experience. So while there might not be as many resources of this is the right answer, there is a lot of resources for this person developed this thing and this is how they did it and this is how they worked and all these different things. um Yeah. One last one, I guess, is this is not a specific resource, but this is find a developer that you like and follow them in whatever
Awesome.
branch you are in. If you are an engineer, one of my favorite people that I like to read their documents every so often is John Carmack, who is the engineer on Doom, and most recently the ex person of the board at Oculus, or the company formerly known as Oculus. He was very much into that VR and stuff like that. If you're an artist, look for an artist that you really look up to and see and listen, and not just look at their art, but see like what their process is and all these things. If you're a designer, designers is probably the easiest one to find resources for, because you have GDC has had a lot of talks by a lot of designers. Artists and engineers are a little bit harder to get a hold of their thoughts and processes about things, because you only usually get to see their final product, not the processes. So yeah, so that's another one. Like, find somebody you enjoy and try to see, okay, what do they like, and things like that. And I guess finally, God, I've said finally so many times, mentorship. You will be surprised by how much you never realized you know until you mentor someone. Sometimes something you take for granted that has been in the back of your head that you've never quantified or you've never really thought of comes to light when you mentor someone and you tell them, "Oh, this is how I would approach," and then you realize, "Oh, shoot, that's actually a pretty good lesson that most people should that a lot of people should take into account." And this is you I think it was it Albert Einstein. There was somebody who said if you can't explain it simply, then you don't fully understand it. I don't remember who it is
Um,
said. I might be thinking the wrong person. Sorry.
the the classic keep it simple. And I don't want to say the other word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
classic
Keep
keep
it simple.
with that people. If you're passionate about game development and you wanted to come in and learn, then I hope that today's stream uh, was a very good learning opportunity. At least for me, it definitely was. It definitely was. So, Francisco, dude, thank you again for sharing your experience and sharing your progress. And uh, if you can, oh, that's true.
I'm very.
That's true.
That's very
Francisco,
awkward.
how do people follow you? Thank-
Oh wow!
Gracias,
You can
Luis.
find me.
Here's
I am on. I don't have an X account anymore, or
oh,
rather,
that's
I
the
don't
first one I put.
follow, or rather, I don't
Nice.
check it anymore. Because
Well, then
you
I
can
put
find
your
me on
LinkedIn as
Threads.
well.
Thank you. Yeah, my LinkedIn is good. My Threads is good. Instagram Threads. It's ed_fantastico on everything except LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is more professional. Um, you can find me there on Twitch. I barely ever stream, but if you ever want to see me stream for some reason, you can find me at twitch.com el fantastico, twitch.tv, not .com, twitch.tv fantastico. I will make sure to follow you. I didn't know I wasn't following you on LinkedIn. I am a Patreon subscriber, but I'm not a LinkedIn follower apparently. So I will fix that post haste.
Cool. Well, and by the way, thank you for reminding sharing
Yes, of course, and I'm
Francisco's
also in the
social media. Oh,
I'm
sorry. Go
also
ahead.
on the Discord. I'm sorry. Also on the Discord. You can always hit me up.
That
I am there. Fantastico.
people, we are learning this process as well. so, so it's all a learning process, and
Maybe I should
and we
just get a
we
link
learn
tree.
we learn through the community as well. So it's how we do it. So yeah. But again, thank you everybody for joining, and again, thank you Francisco for sharing. And with that, folks, we say good night. Hopefully we can bring you another Creator Diving episode soon. And yeah,
Mhm.
later everyone. I am
Bye.
looking